This is Joe Sorrentino of Lean Quality Systems.
And so what we're going to do is I'm going to go into the introduction of the AS9100C. As you can tell, I'm really excited about it. And there's a lot of reasons I'm excited about it, because I think this is a long time coming, and you're going to find out some things that you didn't expect about the new revision to the AS9100C, and also the impact it's going to have on all organizations. First of all, I want you to understand one thing. There's a change to the title. And this is really important, because the first part of this, right up front here, there's a few things. There's about 7 things I put down here that's really important. The first one is the change to the title. It used to be aviation organizations. No longer that exists, and you're going to find the same theme throughout the entire standard. You're going to find it moves away from aviation, and it talks about customer requirements, regulatory and statutory requirements. And you're going to see a big change. And as you can see, it's aviation, space, and defense organizations. And then it also recommends to be used for anything with any criticality or anything or any company. And the degree that you use it is based on the criticality of your product, obviously. And it started out as aerospace. The second part we're going to talk about is customer, the requirements. It's going to always mention in here 3 things that are very important. Number one is when we talk about requirements, which they've taken the word quality out in a lot of areas and just said requirements. And they talk about the customer requirements, they talk about statutory and regulatory requirements. Very important. That means that the standard itself, AS9100, your manual and your operating procedures sit dormant. And the amount of influence they have on the product that you're going to do is going to be based on the customer requirements, statutory and regulatory requirements, and also if you have anything personal within your company that you want to deal with. Very interesting. The biggest thing is customer satisfaction, and they're always talking about the reliability of the product and the requirements and so forth. Now, customer, statutory, and regulatory requirements, the changes they made in the standard specifically deal with that. And what they're trying to influence you to do is, number one, the customer requirements are defined. They come in SOWs, they come in purchase orders, they come in full-term contracts. Doesn't make any difference how it comes to you, but their requirements are gospel at this point. And it's really important to understand that we take the customer requirements, we add some requirements for our customer, and we have to be influenced by statutory and regulatory requirements. And that'll take in statutory and regulatory will take in the requirements. Statutory is written laws by the legislature, and the regulatory requirements are usually on the side of the people, and the regulatory requirements are more safety to the people. And so you're going to see that pop up in there. We're talking about globalization of the industry. Now, this is really important. Over the last 10 years, we've seen massive changes in companies. We've seen downsizing. We've seen what we call bolt-on companies, companies acquiring all these different organizations and bringing all these different people under their belt, so to speak, or in their arms. And then they're taking and they're doing what we call lean, and what I call a lot of times is anorexic, because if lean is performed in the wrong, with the wrong intent, then the anorexic side comes up, because one thing real simple I want to get into just on this point, and then I'm going to get off it real quick. When a CEO goes into a company and says, I'm going to make some changes, he goes in front of a board and he says, I'm going to increase your profit margin by this much. And that's how he gets hired. He gets hired for the amount of profit increase he can bring into that company. So what he does, and anyone can do it, I don't care who it is, everyone out there in the audience can do it. We can go in there and we can cut costs. And we get rid of the old dudes who are being paid a lot. We get rid of anything that has overhead to it, or we think that has overhead monetary. Not necessarily when a CEO is thinking, he's thinking monetarily, he's not necessarily thinking about the good of the company. If it's the owner of the company, it's a different story. He's thinking about the good of the company because he birthed that baby. That's all I'm going to say about that right now. So let's move on. So organizations have challenges and products. We're dealing with subcontractors. And in the realm of what's happened over the last 10 years, we've seen some major problems. We've seen just for instance, the toy problem with Mattel, okay? And right away, oh, it's China's fault, right? We're talking about configuration management. We're going to talk about some definitions a little bit later on. We're going to go through them. And suppliers. Suppliers are using suppliers who are using suppliers who are using suppliers who are using suppliers. I hope I stressed that enough for you. And that means the control is gone. It's totally gone. It's something that really hurts my feelings because I come out of the nuclear submarine arena, and I've seen the results of the loss of configuration management. Now this is the biggie. Over the course of the years, there has been a big change between the 20th century and the 21st century. And this is what it is. In the 20th century, we had the, from Deming on, from 1955, we had the triangle. And we had employees coming into a company and being nurtured up as a trainee, and then to a journeyman, and then to a trainer, and then to a manager, and so forth up the line. So the companies had personnel that were trained both technically and then also trained in management. Today, I'm sorry to say, but that's a lost art. Most companies are bringing in people at a middle level because they're outsourcing everything. We're no longer manufacturing anything in particular. It's ridiculous. I shouldn't say ridiculous, but I'm saying the consequences are really, really tough. And that's what this standard is about. The standard is to lay the foundation of, when I look at it, it's common sense. They're going to lay down common sense and hope that the organizations that impose this standard here use that common sense. So we go down in the 21st century, as you can see, in the middle we have a band of managers, and the company is being held up by subcontractors. Very few, even Boeing, the C-17 project in Long Beach, thank you. The C-17 project at Long Beach, if you go there and have the opportunity to watch them build a plane, all the parts come in. It's kitted. All these parts come in from all over the world. The engines come from here, the wings come from there, and they put it together. They bring it out back in a matter of a few weeks. It's out the back. They pressure test it. They put it in this big building and pressurize it to make sure that it can withstand the pressures. And then that son of a gun takes off from that point within a few weeks and flies. It's incredible to watch. If you have the opportunity and you have any connections with Boeing, I recommend that you go down there and see that. Because you can stand in one building and see parts coming in the front door and the plane going out the back door. Incredible. But that's the makeup of our companies nowadays. They're outsourcers. And that's why when we talked about the globalization of the world and the outsourcing, you can see the problems, problems and problems and problems, and you can see them popping up every day. Some of them we hear about, most of them we don't. Okay? It's good. And on our next one here, like we said, the ISO 9001-2008 recognized the globalization problem. They recognized it. They said, whoa, this is out of control here. Over the last 10 years, we're dealing with all different cultures. We're dealing with all different countries. We're dealing with all different products. So how do we control that? Or how do we lay down a foundation that will really help these companies establish some kind of control over that? And that's what it is, the AS9100C. I recommend that even if you have a company and you want to be in the 2008-9000, it doesn't hurt, because every company that I went into, even though they asked for the ISO 9000 at that time, the 2003 or whatever, I put in the AS9100. And the reason I did it was because it had specific controls that you're going to see pop up here that are so important to an organization that without it, you can actually be getting yourself into heavy liability problems. Now, one of the main things to always think about, when I was in the military, and I had at that time I had a full crop of hair, I was really, really handsome, you know. This is the result of all them years. But when I was in the military, the first thing we were trained to do as quality assurance was to identify the intent of the standard. What's the intent of the standard? If you didn't understand the intent of the standard, how could you understand the significance of what it means? Okay? So the intent of this standard is to deal with all organizations. But in particular, it's going to deal with organizations that have that design, develop, and produce products, and they maintain it and so forth. All this, anything relating to that. The next intent is any organization whose primary business is providing maintenance to these products. Okay? And the third one is OEMs, original manufacturing, original equipment manufacturers, same thing. So you can see it covers the whole spectrum. Either you're designing your own product, or you're supporting someone who designs their product, or you're reproducing a product. This standard is the way to go. And you're going to find out why when we go over the definitions here. And then we're going to take a short break, and I'm going to do some questions and answers. Hopefully, if I don't have any answers, I have a room full of people here that may have it. Let's go to the next slide. Important. The next two slides here are probably going to be the most important slides that you're going to see, because they're going to deal with things that are real. They're going to deal with things that deal with liability, with safety, with responsibility, with cultural differences and personalities. It's going to tone them down so that they work together. First one, risk. They talk about special requirements. So now we have risk, and now we have special requirements. So what they're saying is there's a reason that they define these words, and there's a reason they want you to understand them. Number one, risk. That's pretty easy. What kind of risk do we have? Number two, special requirements. If the customer, regulatory or state requirements or a legislative branch has some special requirements, they have to be identified. They talk about critical items. If anything is really critical on that product and could cause failure to the product or safety, okay, that's important. The next one is key characteristics. This is an easy one because most in the aerospace industry, it's very explainable, because all the drawings and specifications, if anything is critical, they put a key characteristic on there, which is part of configuration management. And that key characteristic identifies and also tells you what specific information has to be there. Anytime there's a key characteristic, a critical item, a special requirement, a risk, it has to be documented and recorded. You're going to find that the standard says that when that's called out by either the customer, statutory, regulatory, or the company feels it's important, it has to be called out and identified and recorded. There has to be a record of it. And it talks down at the bottom, they have a note. It's actually defined in the standard. They say special requirements and critical items are new terms, and also key characteristics. They're interchangeable. Doesn't make any difference. You can say special requirements, you can say critical items, you can say key characteristics. They're interchangeable because the same thing applies. They have to be addressed, they have to be documented, and there has to be a record of it. Simple as that. And the next set of definitions I have here come from section 7. The first section was in the first part of the book where they talked about terms and definitions. The second set here is in section 7. And everyone knows that from the forward to section 3, through section 3, deals with basically the standard. It sort of lines up the standard. It goes in there and it talks about what the foundation, the intent, the rationale of the standard is, and things like that there. Come around section 4, we get into the foundation, which we're going to get into in a second here. Is going to get into the foundation of requirements and record keeping and stuff like that. Now, section 7, everybody knows that section 7 takes in 90% of all the people in the company. Section 7 applies to everyone in the company who, what I call, makes money. They produce money with their hands and with their brains because they touch the product, they move it, they have materials, they nuts and bolts, paperwork, they do the inspections. So section 7 is the nuts and bolts of a company. Everything else from the forward to section 4, 5, 6, up to 6 are overhead. right? Their support system. They support Section 7 people. And I'm guaranteeing that 95, 98% of all the companies are Section 7 people. Okay? And here they are. Project management. That's a new one. Project manager is very important because a project manager, the reason they made it and defined it, they said structurally controlled manner, and they have to look at the acceptable risk. These are people that are making a conscious decision. There's no guidelines for them. They have to have good moral background. They have to have a good foundation. They have to know the product. They have to know the risk. They have to know the configuration. It's all part of it. So the project manager, so that's a new one there. So a project manager is saying that your company should have someone that manages this contract. And like I said, it depends on the criticality and the complexity of whatever the job or product is, okay, determines how much project management is involved in it. Risk management, we have to manage the risk. And the risk can take in from the organization's risk on-time deliveries, what kind of financial problems and everything else for the product. But risk management is when we deal with anything. If you notice, this is section 1.2, so this is the planning section. Okay? The same with the project management. It's planning. We have to come up with some kind of plan of project management. What has to be managed? How much? How critical? Next one, risk management, same thing. It's in section 1. It's in the planning section. And that's the risk. Configuration management, section 1.3. And configuration management was just touched on very lightly in the other books. They brought it up and said configuration management, and that was it. This one here, they actually moved it from section, I think it was in 4 or something like that, and they actually moved it down into section 7. Like I said, the working section. And configuration management, actually a year and a half ago, I actually wrote a book on configuration management, and it's on Barnes and Nobles and all this other stuff. But when I wrote it, I was saying, configuration management, you know, this is a good book to go to sleep by, right? Who would have something like that there? But then in the new standard, they defined it, and I'm so excited about it because it sort of like justifies or sort of like says that, yeah, you was on the right track through all these years. Like I said, when I had the full crop of hair and stuff. Configuration management, control of work transfer, important. This is designed almost, not exclusively, but for subcontractors. There's no way that you would give a subcontractor under any circumstances full reign. And by giving them full reign, that means that we actually go in there and we say, yeah, build it to this drawing, right? That's the same thing that Mattel did. That's the same thing that the Apollo flight people did. They have subcontractors do that kind of stuff. It's a disaster. What it's saying is you have to tell them what to do. Not give them a drawing or just show them the SOW or the statement of work from the customer. That's not the way it works. You are liable. So this standard, the intent of it, is to establish the foundation that because you're liable and you're going to subcontract, that has to be defined. What are you subcontracting? What's the acceptance criteria? What are the requirements? What kind of specifications are applicable? What kind of legislatory state requirements are required? What kind of federal requirements? Okay? So good. So that's it. So we went over a few things here. We went through the foundation of the standard, its intent, what it's intended for, and it's intended for all organizations. And we also talked about that they removed aerospace requirements, and they said it's for aviation, space, and defense organizations. That's a broad scope. And that's going to turn a lot of people who are ISO 9000 right now to AS9100C, because it's not an aerospace standard anymore exclusively. It's aviation, space, and defense organizations, and then there's another clause in there that says anyone can use this. And if you look at what's in there, I recommend you use it. It's a good one.